Hi, my name is Bill Wiese. Thank you for joining me. Some of you know I wrote a book called 23 Minutes in Hell. It is about the vision God gave me of hell. Now, many of you asked, what is the significance of the 23? Well, first of all, the night of my experience, I woke up at 3 a.m. to get a glass of water. That is when the Lord took me to hell in this vision. Well, when I returned, I entered back into my body, and with the thoughts of hell in my mind, I screamed, and this woke up my wife. Well, she first looked at our digital clock, which read 3:23. So that is where the 23 comes from. And it happened to be on the 23rd of November. Now, we don't live our lives following numbers. However, numerous resources state that numbers are significant in the Bible. For example, 3 means perfection. 5 means grace. 7 means completeness. 10 means law or divine order. 12 means judge or perfection of government, and so on. And it's interesting that 23 means death. Now, first of all, I discovered that the word hell is mentioned 23 times in the King James New Testament. It was also interesting how many times this number kept coming up after my experience. For example, the publisher asked me to write the book, and I was late completing it. And after many edits, I rushed down to the post office to mail it off. Well, it happened to be the 23rd of the month. I also noticed that I spoke 23 times during the first year after this experience. Now, for several years, during every ministry trip, the number 23 would come up somehow. For instance, our seat was changed to row 23 on the plane. Or the pilot would say, we are flying at 23,000 feet. Or it's 23 degrees at our destination. Or the crosswinds are at 23 miles per hour. Now, at a church meeting, we had 23 people come to Christ. Or maybe our car rental spot was in row 23, and so on. Now, one particular trip, 23 had not come up. We were leaving the church, and a guy came up to us and said, Bill, you're my Michael Jordan. Now, it became pretty humorous at that point. It's also interesting that this just happens to be the 23rd year since this experience. Now, I want to read you also some commentaries on the number 23. Matthew Henry's commentary on the whole Bible says, and this he's talking about the Old Testament, the courts of judgment sat in the gate of their principal cities, the judges ordinarily in number 23. These tried, condemned, and executed murderers, so that whoever killed was in danger of their judgment. Now that's interesting. There had to be 23 people on the jury to condemn someone to death. So 23 connected to death again. Unger's commentary, page 1075, says, part of man's curse is toil and labor, and that occurs 23 times in the book of Genesis. Interesting. Another one, Pastor Chuck Smith, he said this, according to many physicists, a polar axis shift takes place about every 5,000 years. Our present polar axis is set at 23 degrees pitch in its relation to the sun. This slant gives the Earth its seasons. Physicists tell us that a polar axis shift creates great convulsions throughout the Earth, causing mountains to disappear. It is very possible that the flood in Noah's time could have been created by the polar axis shift. It would closely correspond to the time some physicists say the last shift took place. Now that's interesting that the flood involves death and the Earth axis happens to be at 23 degrees. Again, the death connected with 23. Now, I'll just give you some more verses. I also found out that there are many verses where the address of the verse or in the body of the verse, it mentions 23 all throughout the Bible, and it's usually connected with hell or death. For instance, just to give you a few, Luke 16:23, Jesus was talking about the rich man in hell. And in verse 23, it says, and in hell he lifted up his eyes. Jude 23 says, and others saved with fear, pulling them out of the fire, talking about hell. Proverbs 11:23, the expectation of the wicked is wrath. That wrath is talking about judgment in hell. Matthew 11:23, Jesus said, he shall be brought down to hell. 1 Corinthians 10:8 says, neither let us commit fornication as some of them committed and fell in one day 20 and 3,000. And Psalms 23, it's usually read at funerals. So I think that's interesting. You know, now, you may think this is all contrived, but it's not. My wife and I simply see this as God's sense of humor to encourage us. Thank you for listening.